In the early 1900s, a German architect would devise a plan to do something crazy. Something that had never even been attempted. See that narrow gap between Morocco and Spain? Well, Hermann Sorgel had the idea to build a giant dam right there. He thought it would be possible to remove all the water from the Mediterranean Sea and uncover an entirely new continent. And the craziest part of it all is that he may just have been onto something. While this all sounds like science fiction or something out of a comic book, this was a real proposal, and its name was Atlantropa. To understand where such an insane idea came from, we have to take a step back. The year is 1918, World War I has just ended, and Germany was shattered. Economically, politically, and even spiritually. As one of their first unanimous actions, the newly formed League of Nations passed the Treaty of Versailles, which required Germany to pay reparations in the amount of 132 billion German gold marks, equivalent to roughly $600 billion today. As a result, hyperinflation swept through the Weimar Republic. People had to carry wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy a loaf of bread, causing the German middle class to collapse within just a few short years. The old order was gone, leaving many Germans feeling hopeless. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the United States was booming. With New York skylines climbing higher and higher with each passing year, Americans saw a boom in mass production, with incredible developments in automotives and electricity. Things were going pretty well for the United States. Many European intellectuals and elites were left with a staggering question. Is the continent that once ruled the world now destined for decline? Or is there a way to fight back? To compete, not through war, but through transformation. It was in this period of collapse and ambition that a radical idea took root. Enter Hermann Sorgel, an architect by training, a dreamer by nature, and a man obsessed with solving Europe's problems through engineering. He wasn't a politician or a general or even an engineer. He was something arguably more dangerous. A visionary. Sorgel believed that Europe's salvation lied not in political alliances or military conquests, but in scale. He envisioned Germany's restoration to its former glory via massive civilization-defining projects. He saw technology not just as a tool, but as a weapon of peace, one that could overpower conflict itself. In 1928, Hermann unveiled his answer to Europe's problems, Atlantropa, a single monolithic solution to the continent's energy crisis, land shortages, unemployment, and geopolitical instability. His proposition? Build a dam across the Strait of Gibraltar, cut the Mediterranean off from the Atlantic Ocean, and allow it to evaporate. Yes, you heard me right. Evaporate. Hermann asserted that over the decades, sea levels would drop by up to 200 meters, and as a result, entire new regions of land would emerge. Land that could be used for farming, industry, and settlement. This wasn't a proposal, it was a manifesto, a utopian fever dream, and he would devote the rest of his life convincing the world to take it seriously. So how would draining the sea actually work? Well, step one would be to build the Gibraltar Dam. This massive structure, about 14 kilometers long, would connect Spain and Morocco. It would slowly cut off the flow of water from the Atlantic Ocean into the Mediterranean Sea. Sorgel estimated the dam would require at least 200 million cubic meters of concrete, several times more than the Hoover Dam, and hundreds of thousands of workers. Building it would take decades. Step 2 would to be let nature take over. With the dam in place, the Mediterranean would no longer get refilled. Over a few decades, the hot climate would cause the sea to evaporate. Water levels would drop as much as 200 meters, revealing huge areas of land. Step 3 would be to build more dams. Sorgel proposed two more major barriers, one at the Dardanelles to close off the Black Sea, and another at the Suez Canal to block off the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. These would require even more resources and manpower, making Atlantropa the largest engineering effort in human history. Step 4 would be to redirect the rivers. Major rivers like the Nile, Rhone, and Po would be rerouted to help control where water flowed and to support agriculture in the new land. This would involve extensive earthworks and the construction of new channels and dams. Step 5 would be to generate electricity. These giant dams wouldn't just hold water back. They would also house hydroelectric plants. Sorgel believed that they could generate more electricity than Europe could even use, powering the entire continent and parts of Africa. Step 6 would be to build new cities and railroads. With new land emerging, Sorgel imagined constructing ports, towns, and high-speed rail lines across the new connected Europe and Africa. The entire landscape would be reimagined to serve this new supercontinent. Step 7 would be to fight desertification. To stop nearby deserts from spreading, Sorgel also proposed building artificial lakes to keep the region green and livable. These would be fed by diverted rivers and rainfall catchment systems. In Sorgel's mind, this wasn't just about engineering, it was about reshaping the entire globe and building a new future from the ground up. But it didn't end there. See, Sorgel didn't merely want to build dams, he wanted to redraw civilization as the world knew it. Atlantropa would unite Europe and Africa into a single continent, physically, economically, and politically. He didn't just imagine a new world order, he tried to build it. Sorgel believed that fusing Africa and Europe would secure peace. In his mind, if all European nations shared the same infrastructure, the same power grid, the same trade routes, they'd have no reason to go to war. But behind the utopian dream lied darker truths. Sorgel saw Africa not as an equal partner, but as a blank slate. He spoke of taming the continent, of bringing civilization to its wild interior. The new land gained by draining the Mediterranean wouldn't belong to North African nations, it would be colonized by Europeans. Atlantropa was a Eurocentric empire disguised as a humanitarian project. Peace, in Sorgel's mind, would be achieved through control, not through cooperation. As imaginative and bold as Atlantropa was, the plan faced enormous logistical problems that made it virtually impossible to execute, even with today's technology. First, the scale. The Gibraltar Dam alone would have been one of the largest engineering feats in human history, requiring more concrete than had ever been poured in history, and enough labor to equal that of a decades-long war effort. Transporting materials to the site, building in deep waters with powerful ocean currents, and maintaining structural integrity over such a long span was a nightmare waiting to happen. Second, the evaporation timeline. The idea of letting the Mediterranean evaporate might sound simple, but in reality it would take over a century to lower the water levels by 200 meters. And evaporation would release massive amounts of moisture into the atmosphere, literally changing the climate and weather patterns across all of Europe and Africa. Then there's the environmental cost. Sorgel's plan didn't account for the destruction of marine life or the collapse of delicate ecosystems that had evolved over millions of years. The change in salinity, temperature, and air moisture could have caused chain reactions that no one in the 1920s or 30s could have predicted, many of whom had competing interests or were already on the brink of war. The idea of a unified Europe working together to build a peaceful megastructure might have been inspiring, but it was completely out of step with the rise of fascism, nationalism, and colonial ambition at the time. Also, the fact that it would only take one bomb attack on the dam to flood an entire continent is a pretty big issue. In short, Sorgel's vision was more fantasy than future, not because it lacked imagination, but because it underestimated the real-world complexities of nature, technology, and humanity. So what if this wild plan had actually worked the way Sorgel imagined? The Mediterranean Sea would shrink dramatically, revealing massive stretches of land where water once was. Southern Europe and Northern Africa would gain hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of new territory. New cities would rise where there were once waves, coastal countries would suddenly find themselves landlocked, Venice would be gone, its canals turned into dry valleys. The Adriatic Sea would become the Adriatic Basin, a vast flat plain potentially turned into farmland, industrial zones, or planned cities. Southern Italy would be connected to the rest of the continent by land, while islands like Corsica and Sardinia would become part of mainland Europe. In Africa, entire new regions would be created for colonization and agriculture. The Nile Delta and other key waterways would be re-engineered to support large-scale irrigation and settlement projects. Major rivers would be redirected to flow into the newly exposed land, helping create fertile zones across what used to be ocean floor. The Mediterranean's once stable climate would shift. New weather patterns would form due to the change in sea levels and exposed terrain. Some areas might become greener with with redirected rivers, while others would become more harsh and arid. Artificial lakes and reservoirs would dot the landscape, helping manage water supply and resist desertification. A new power grid, fueled by massive hydroelectric dams, would supply enough energy to power the entire continent. High-speed trains would connect Europe to Africa, creating a new geopolitical union. Trade would flow along new land routes, and a new map of the world would emerge, one defined not by natural borders, but by engineering. In Sorgel's vision, this wasn't destruction, it was evolution, a leap forward into a future built not by war, but by willpower, collaboration, and concrete. So how did people react to Sorgel's idea? Mostly, they were confused and doubtful. Engineers asked, how could such a massive dam even be built? How long would it take, and what materials would it even need? The Mediterranean Sea is huge, over 2.5 million square kilometers. Governments weren't interested either. In the 1930s, countries like Germany and Italy were turning to dictators like Hitler and Mussolini. They didn't want peaceful megaprojects, they wanted power. Some scientists raised concerns. While environmental science wasn't fully developed, some already saw the risks: sea life dying, farmland ruined by salt, and possible earthquakes from draining the sea. Still, Sorgel didn't give up. He wrote books, built models, and spoke at universities. He even suggested moving whole populations into the new land. This was until 1952, when Sorgel died by being hit by a car while biking. Some say it was an accident, others think it might have been something darker. We'll never know for sure. His dream faded, but it never completely vanished. Today, Atlantropa is mostly forgotten, but not entirely. Writers, artists, and creators have explored Atlantropa in books, games, and alternate history scenarios. Some imagine a world where the Mediterranean Sea is completely dry, replaced by deserts, farmland, or even megacities. Others reimagined the Gibraltar Dam as a symbol of power or even a battlefield. And in real life, as climate change gets worse, more people are talking about giant engineering projects. Things like capturing carbon, blocking sunlight, or even changing the oceans. What Atlantropa shows us is that bold ideas can catch on when people are scared and desperate. It also shows us something deeper, that big dreams can hide big problems. Sorgel said his plan was peaceful and scientific, but behind it was colonial thinking, environmental harm, and ignoring the people who lived there. A map doesn't just show the world, it can change it, sometimes for the worse. So while Atlantropa never actually ended up happening, it's still a really cool and interesting idea. Maybe not for the motives that were behind it, but still. Hermann Sorgel imagined a new continent that would bring stability, energy, and unity to a shattered Europe. As we face rising seas, shrinking forests, and rapid technology, we should remember Atlantropa not just as a warning, but as a challenge to dream better, to think deeper, and to build more wisely. Because the next time someone wants to drain an ocean, we just might be able to do it. That's all I have. If you enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe and check out another video. See ya.